Erica Thompson never imagined that a routine 911 call would turn her world upside down, but when Officer Daniel Brooks arrived at her door, what seemed like protection quickly twisted into a nightmare that would shatter her sense of safety forever. It was a quiet, uneventful night in the town of Clearwater, the kind of night where even the wind seemed to whisper softly through the trees. Most residents were asleep, their homes dark and silent, unaware that anything could disrupt the calm. Erica Thompson, however, was wide awake. She lived alone in a modest house at the edge of town, a small yard bordered by hedges and a few tall trees. The house had always given her a sense of safety, a cocoon where she could retreat after long days at work. But tonight, the familiar comfort felt fragile, almost unreal. Around midnight, Erica heard it, a faint scraping sound near her back door. At first, she tried to convince herself it was just the wind, or perhaps a branch brushing against the siding. But the sound persisted, irregular and deliberate, like someone testing whether the door might give way. Her heart began to pound and a cold sweat spread across her skin. She quietly checked the locks on her doors and windows, each click of the latch doing little to calm the growing unease. With trembling hands, she picked up her phone and dialed 911, her voice barely above a whisper as she explained the situation. The dispatcher's calm, professional tone provided some reassurance, and Erica was instructed to stay inside, keep her doors locked, and wait for the officer to arrive. Within minutes, headlights appeared outside her window, and Officer Daniel Brooks stepped out of his patrol car. Known for his calm demeanor and polite approach, Brooks had been with the Clearwater Police Department for nearly 10 years. He greeted Erica with a friendly smile, which initially eased her anxiety. He walked around the house, flashlight in hand, inspecting the perimeter carefully. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the yard, nothing to suggest someone had actually attempted to break in. Despite the lack of evidence, Erica remained tense. She tried to speak casually, to seem composed, but the officer noticed the quiver in her voice and the restless movement of her hands. Brooks stayed longer than might have seemed necessary, asking about her neighbors, the usual security measures, and whether she had noticed anything unusual in the days leading up to the call. Erica answered as best she could, though her mind raced with every sound, the wind rustling through the trees, the occasional creak of the house settling, and the distant hum of cars on the nearby road. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Brooks assured her that everything seemed fine, and that he would file a report. He reminded her to call if she noticed anything else and left, leaving Erica alone once again. She locked the door behind him and sank into a chair, trying to steady her breathing. Relief and unease battled within her. She was grateful for his presence, yet something about the way he had looked around her home lingered in her mind. It was a small detail, a glance that had lasted just a moment too long, the way he had paused near her hallway mirror. But it unsettled her in a way she couldn't shake. That night, Erica lay awake for hours, replaying the events over and over. She wondered if she had imagined the sound outside, if the fear had made everything seem more threatening than it really was. Yet the memory of Brooks standing in her doorway, calm and authoritative, left a strange imprint in her mind, one that would echo far beyond that single night. What had seemed like a routine call to the department would soon spiral into something far more sinister, something that no one in Clearwater could have anticipated. The quiet town, once peaceful and predictable, had unknowingly become the backdrop for a chain of events that would test the limits of trust, safety, and perception. 2 nights after the first incident, Erica Thompson found herself on edge again. The house, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now seemed unfamiliar and vulnerable. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the trees made her flinch. She tried to dismiss the lingering unease from the previous night, telling herself that it had been nothing more than a false alarm and that Officer Brooks' presence had been entirely professional. Yet a sense of apprehension had taken root in her mind, and it refused to be shaken. Just as she began to consider calling the police to report another suspicious sound, headlights appeared in the driveway. Her heart jumped. She didn't recognize the car at first, but then she saw the familiar uniform and the badge glinting under the porch light. Officer Brooks had returned. He claimed he was just checking in, ensuring everything was all right after her earlier call. At first, Erica felt relieved. She had appreciated his presence during the first incident, and she allowed herself to believe that his visit was simply a continuation of that concern. But almost immediately, something felt off. The way he moved through her home seemed less procedural and more deliberate, almost as if he were taking note of her possessions and the layout of her rooms rather than performing a security check. He lingered in the living room, his gaze scanning areas that had no relevance to the initial complaint. When he asked questions, they didn't feel like inquiries about safety. They were oddly personal, focused on her habits, routines, and even the way her belongings were arranged. Erica forced herself to answer, though a knot of unease grew tighter in her chest with each passing moment. After a while, Brooks left, assuring her he would be nearby if she needed anything. But once the door closed behind him, Erica felt a lingering sense of violation. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself that perhaps she was overreacting or that officers sometimes linger to reassure residents. Yet, a subtle dread settled over her, one that whispered she was not imagining the oddities in his behavior. That night, sleep came fitfully, punctuated by vivid, uneasy dreams of someone moving through her home without permission. Over the following days, Erica couldn't ignore the feeling that her privacy had been compromised. Small inconsistencies in her home reinforced her fears. A chair slightly out of place, a drawer that didn't quite close the same way. It was as if someone had been inside when she wasn't looking. Friends and neighbors noticed her growing anxiety and encouraged her to trust her instincts. One friend in particular mentioned that it was unusual for an officer to return unprompted after a routine check, a comment that planted a seed of suspicion in Erica's mind. She began paying closer attention, watching for anything that might seem out of place. Each evening, she double-checked her doors and windows, noting minor details that might indicate someone had been in her home. Erica knew she couldn't dismiss her unease, yet she also feared appearing paranoid. The tension was unbearable, a constant whisper in the back of her mind that something was wrong, that the man who had once seemed so trustworthy might not have been entirely innocent. Every shadow, every flicker of movement outside the window heightened her anxiety, and she realized that this was no longer just a matter of caution. It was the beginning of a terrifying realization that someone she had trusted might be exploiting their authority in the most personal and invasive way possible. Days passed after Officer Brooks' second visit, and Erica Thompson's unease grew into something more tangible. The small inconsistencies around her home, which she had initially brushed off as forgetfulness or her imagination, began to take on a darker meaning. Items she had carefully placed in drawers and cabinets were slightly shifted. Small belongings she was certain she had left untouched appeared moved or missing. Each discovery, though minor on its own, compounded her sense of vulnerability. She began to feel as though her home, the one place that had always been her refuge, was no longer hers. Unable to ignore the pattern any longer, Erica decided to take proactive steps. She installed a small, discreet camera in her living room, aiming it at the main entrance and the hallway. Her intention was simple. She wanted proof, something concrete that could confirm whether her fears were justified or if her mind was exaggerating harmless coincidences. For several nights, the camera captured nothing unusual, and Erica tried to convince herself that perhaps she was overreacting. She forced herself to relax, hoping that the strange feelings were simply a lingering after-effect of the initial 911 call. Then, one night, as she reviewed the footage on her laptop, Erica froze. The screen showed a shadow moving across the room, followed by a figure entering through the front door. Her pulse quickened as she recognized the familiar uniform. It was Officer Brooks. The footage revealed him moving through the house in a manner that was deliberate and methodical, not hurried or searching for danger. He walked past the living room, lingered in the kitchen, and then moved toward her bedroom area. Erica's stomach turned as she saw him opening drawers and rifling through personal items. His actions were calculated, aware of where the camera was likely positioned, yet he seemed to assume it would not capture everything. Erica's hands shook as she paused the video, the realization settling in with a heavy weight. This was no casual visit. Brooks was inside her home without permission, without cause, and he had been exploiting his position as a police officer to access spaces that should have been private and secure. Her mind raced as she tried to process the violation. The sense of safety she had once felt in her home was shattered, replaced by fear and disbelief. She knew she could not face this alone. Immediately, Erica contacted the police department, her voice trembling as she explained what the footage showed. She sent them the video as evidence, hoping they would take it seriously. Internal Affairs launched an investigation, and Erica waited anxiously for their response. During those days, every sound in her house made her flinch. She double-checked locks, monitored her surroundings, and could hardly bear to be alone. The knowledge that the man who had once appeared trustworthy was capable of such behavior weighed on her constantly. The discovery of Brooks inside her home marked a turning point. Erica's fear became validation. The creeping sense that she had been violated was no longer a vague intuition. It was real. The footage confirmed her worst suspicions. The officer she had once relied upon had used his authority to invade her privacy in the most personal and intimate way possible. This revelation was only the beginning, hinting at a larger pattern of behavior that, once uncovered, would shock not only Erica but the entire town of Clearwater. The investigation into Officer Daniel Brooks began almost immediately after Erica Thompson submitted the footage. Internal Affairs treated the case with urgency, recognizing the seriousness of an officer allegedly using his badge to violate a resident's privacy. Brooks, a 10-year veteran of the Clearwater Police Department, initially denied all accusations, claiming that the video must have been manipulated or taken out of context. He insisted that any visits to Erica's home were either coincidental or entirely innocent, an explanation that investigators found increasingly implausible as they reviewed patrol logs and cross-referenced GPS data from his patrol car. The GPS data revealed multiple instances where Brooks had visited Erica's neighborhood late at night, often without an official call or dispatch. Each entry corresponded to times when Erica noticed minor disturbances in her home, confirming that he had indeed returned more than once without cause. Investigators realized that his actions were deliberate, not accidental. The level of premeditation became more apparent as they delved deeper into his work history and patterns of behavior. Brooks had access to sensitive databases, and it soon emerged that he had looked up Erica's address repeatedly, both on duty and off, suggesting he was tracking her movements and using his position to plan his intrusions. When authorities conducted a search of Brooks' locker and personal residence, the evidence grew even more disturbing. They discovered personal items belonging to other women in town, small pieces of jewelry, photographs, and articles of clothing that clearly did not belong to him. Each item suggested a similar pattern of behavior, exploiting his role as a police officer to access homes and personal belongings under the guise of safety checks. Investigators began contacting these women, many of whom recalled feeling uneasy after interactions with Brooks, or noticing minor disturbances in their homes that they had previously dismissed. The pattern was chilling. The police department faced a growing scandal. An officer who had once been considered a model of integrity and professionalism was now under scrutiny for multiple breaches of trust. The internal investigation was meticulous, involving interviews with colleagues, neighbors, and victims, as well as forensic examination of digital records. Every detail pointed to a troubling reality. Brooks had systematically abused his authority, taking advantage of women who had called 911 in moments of fear and vulnerability. Meanwhile, Erica struggled with the emotional weight of the investigation. Knowing that she was not alone in her experience provided some relief, but it did little to erase the sense of violation she felt. Each report of another victim added to the gravity of the situation, confirming that the intrusions into her home were part of a broader pattern rather than isolated incidents. Erica's bravery in coming forward became a catalyst for uncovering the truth, as her willingness to share the footage inspired others to step forward with their own accounts. As internal affairs continued to build a case, it became clear that Brooks' actions were not simply lapses in judgment. They were intentional, calculated, and predatory. The department moved to place him on administrative leave, pending formal charges, and began implementing stricter protocols to prevent officers from conducting unauthorized visits. The investigation painted a disturbing portrait of a man who had used the very symbol of authority meant to protect the community as a tool for exploitation. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving little room for doubt that Officer Brooks had betrayed not only Erica, but the entire town he had sworn to serve. Officer Daniel Brooks' arrest sent shockwaves through the town of Clearwater. The news that a trusted law enforcement officer had violated multiple women's homes under the guise of protection left the community reeling. Erica Thompson's courage in coming forward was widely praised, and her hidden camera footage became a pivotal piece of evidence in building the case against him. The department faced intense scrutiny, with residents demanding answers about how such behavior could have gone unnoticed for so long. The story dominated local news, with every detail adding to the sense of betrayal felt by the community. Brooks was charged with multiple counts of burglary, stalking, and official misconduct. The trial drew attention far beyond Clearwater, as the notion of a police officer abusing his authority struck a chord nationwide. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case combining Erica's footage, GPS data from Brooks' patrol car, testimonies from other victims, and forensic evidence from his home. Each piece of evidence reinforced a pattern of predatory behavior, showing that Brooks had used his badge to gain access to private spaces and manipulate situations for his own purposes. The courtroom was tense, the air heavy with the collective disbelief of those present. During the proceedings, Brooks maintained a stoic demeanor, refusing to admit guilt or express remorse. His defense tried to cast doubt on the credibility of the victims and the authenticity of the evidence, but the overwhelming documentation left little room for alternative explanations. The jury was faced with a clear narrative. A trusted officer systematically violated the privacy and safety of the very people he had sworn to protect. The verdict was inevitable, and when it was announced, Brooks was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to a long prison term and permanently stripped of his badge and law enforcement privileges. The impact of the case extended beyond legal consequences. The Clearwater Police Department initiated sweeping reforms, implementing stricter oversight, surveillance of officers' off-duty activities, and mandatory training on ethical conduct and boundaries. The community, while shaken, began to heal through dialogue, awareness campaigns, and support networks for victims of similar abuses. Erica Thompson, despite the trauma she endured, became a symbol of resilience. Her actions not only exposed Brooks' misconduct, but also empowered others who had been afraid to speak up. For Erica, the experience left scars that were not easily erased. She moved away from Clearwater to start anew, seeking distance from the home where her privacy had been violated and the town that had witnessed the unfolding scandal. Yet, the memory of that night, of footsteps echoing in her empty house and the man who should have protected her turning into a threat, remained vivid. It served as a reminder of the fragility of trust and the importance of vigilance, even when danger comes from the most unexpected sources. The case of Officer Brooks became a cautionary tale, illustrating how authority can be misused and how courage and persistence can uncover the truth. Erica's decision to document and report his actions not only held him accountable, but also set a precedent for transparency and accountability in law enforcement. Clearwater, once a quiet town, was forever changed. Its residents reminded that safety is not guaranteed, and vigilance, courage, and community are essential in protecting the vulnerable. The story lingered long after the courtroom emptied, a chilling testament to the darkness that can hide behind a badge and the light that courage can bring to expose it.